The story of Wade Wilson closes on a night drenched in rain, as if the city itself wanted to wash away every trace of what happened. In these streets, investigators walked for days, retracing the steps that led to a tragedy no one saw coming. The air was cold, still carrying the tension of unanswered questions. Through early reports, missing timelines, and scattered clues, this city became the backdrop of a case that reminded everyone how quickly a quiet life can turn into a haunting narrative. With each step detectives took, they pieced together the final hours, uncovering motives rooted in fear, desperation, and fractured trust. This street, now quiet, once held the weight of footsteps belonging to a man who was running not just from the law, but from himself. As the rain fell, the case shifted into its last phase, a slow, deliberate uncovering of truth that would eventually bring justice. And in that justice, the story finally began to close. Behind this simple door, investigators found the first tangible threads of the truth. The hallway itself seemed ordinary, lined with identical doors that hid lives of every kind. But this one held silence heavier than the rest. When officers arrived, there were no signs of chaos, no loud arguments, no neighbors crowding to watch. Just a door left slightly ajar, as though someone had left in a hurry without looking back. Within this quiet threshold, the story began to shift from confusion to suspicion. Detectives noticed how small details didn't match what they expected, lights left on, objects slightly out of place, and the unmistakable atmosphere of a night that had gone terribly wrong. This door became a symbol of the moment everything changed, the moment normalcy fractured. As officers crossed the threshold, they carried with them the responsibility not only to understand what happened, but to ensure that the truth did not disappear into silence. And through this doorway, the final steps toward justice would eventually begin. Inside the room, investigators moved with calm precision, documenting every detail with the quiet respect that such scenes demand. Their presence was steady and deliberate, ensuring that not a single clue slipped past them. The bedroom itself offered no dramatic revelation, yet every object held potential meaning. A lamp left on, the faint marks on a bedside table, the subtle shift of fabric, all of it became part of a larger puzzle. As they worked, the room seemed frozen in time, carrying only the echoes of events no one had witnessed. The forensic team knew that understanding what happened required patience, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to truth. The atmosphere was heavy but focused, shaped by the knowledge that their findings would form the foundation of the entire case. And in this quiet, controlled environment, the story's final direction began to emerge. It was here, in the careful hands of forensic work, that the truth started to take shape, offering the first real glimpse of answers hidden beneath the surface. At the heart of the investigation stood a desk covered in details, each file, photo, and scribbled note contributing to the broader portrait of what truly happened. Detectives often returned to this workspace late at night, reviewing the timeline again and again to ensure no mistake threatened the integrity of the case. Every photo told a fragment of the story, every witness statement added nuance, and every unanswered question pushed them deeper into the search for truth. Over time, patterns began to emerge. The inconsistencies in Wade Wilson's statements, the financial pressures he faced, and the timeline he could not fully account for all formed a mosaic pointing toward one conclusion: the desk became the central hub where facts replaced speculation, and clarity replaced doubt. As the pieces aligned, detectives understood that this case was not about sudden chaos but about a slow unraveling of choices that collided on one irreversible night. Through this quiet yet determined work, the truth continued to sharpen, guiding the investigation toward its final resolution. The suspect sketch captured the face that had become central to the entire investigation, calm on the surface, yet hiding a turbulent mix of desperation and denial. Artists worked from witness descriptions, refining each detail until the image matched the man investigators believed was responsible. As the drawing circulated through departments, it acted as a beacon, directing attention to a name already familiar in their files: Wade Wilson. His history was marked with instability, shifting stories, and a trail of unresolved financial burdens that hinted at deeper issues. The sketch became more than an image, it became a psychological window into the suspect's state of mind. Investigators examined his expressions, posture, and documented behavior, piecing together a profile that would help them predict his next move. With every new lead, the sketch reminded them why the search could not slow down. It symbolized a man on the edge, someone who had crossed a line he could never return from. And soon, that image would guide them directly to his location. The bus station at dawn was eerily quiet, washed in pale blue light that softened every sharp edge. This was the place where Wade Wilson slipped out of the city, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. Surveillance footage later confirmed his presence, a man carrying little more than a backpack, avoiding eye contact, moving quickly toward the first available exit. Detectives studying the footage noted his posture, tense, restless, aware that time was running out. The station was nearly empty, which made his movement stand out even more. As buses pulled in and out, he blended into the shifting shadows, disappearing into the quiet morning traffic. This brief moment, captured by a single camera, became a turning point in the investigation. It revealed direction, intention, and urgency. Wade wasn't wandering aimlessly, he was trying to outrun the consequences of a night he couldn't undo. But with every mile he traveled, investigators grew closer, following the digital and financial footprints he didn't realize he had left behind. The rural motel stood as a lone structure on the edge of an empty road, illuminated only by a flickering neon sign that buzzed through the silence. This was where Wade Wilson chose to hide, believing distance could shield him from the truth closing in behind him. The motel manager later recalled how the man kept to himself, paying in cash, avoiding conversation, and insisting on a room far from other guests. Inside that small room, investigators later found remnants of his short stay, discarded food wrappers, a prepaid phone, and scribbled pages filled with scrambled thoughts. These notes revealed a fragmented mindset, not of a man planning escape, but of someone wrestling with fear, regret, and confusion. The motel became another crucial stop on the trail, confirming Wade's movements and narrowing the search radius. As officers pieced together his path, it became clear that this temporary hideout represented the beginning of the end. Wade had run as far as he could, and soon, the quiet isolation of this motel would lead directly to his capture. Among Wade Wilson's belongings, the torn notebook page stood out as one of the most revealing pieces of evidence. The handwriting shifted between shaky and rigid, as if written during moments of panic and exhaustion. While not a confession, the words reflected a mind unraveling under pressure. Phrases about debt, mistrust, and fear were scribbled across the page, hinting at motives that investigators already suspected. This fragment offered insight into Wade's emotional state during his attempted escape. He oscillated between blaming others and blaming himself, between searching for justification and confronting the weight of his actions. The notebook became a psychological cornerstone of the case, illustrating the internal collapse that preceded his final decisions. Investigators studied every scratched-out line, piecing together a narrative of instability and desperation. Though it could not explain everything, the page added depth to their understanding of the suspect they were closing in on. It became part of the story that transformed scattered clues into a coherent truth, a truth that would soon be delivered in court. As the fog settled over the quiet morning roads, a convoy of police vehicles moved steadily toward the outskirts of Briar Hollow. After days of tracking footsteps, surveillance data, and financial traces, investigators finally had a solid lead on Wade's location. The mist created an atmosphere of anticipation, obscuring the horizon and heightening the tension inside the patrol car. Officers remained focused, reviewing the details of Wade's movements and preparing for the possibility that he might attempt to flee once more. They knew this moment mattered, not just for the case, but for the sense of closure the community desperately needed. As the patrol cars advanced, the sound of their engines cut through the silence of the rural landscape. It was the final stretch in a pursuit that had consumed their attention since the night of the incident. With every mile they covered, the truth drew closer, and Wade's options dwindled. The fog might have blurred the surroundings, but it couldn't conceal the fact that justice was finally approaching. The abandoned industrial lot stretched out under the pale sunrise, its rusted beams and overgrown weeds telling a story of neglect and forgotten purpose. It was here, in this desolate place, that officers finally located Wade Wilson walking alone along the gravel path. The vast emptiness around him mirrored the isolation he had been feeling throughout his escape. When officers approached, Wade did not resist. Exhaustion had replaced whatever fleeting hope he had left. The lot became the silent witness to his final moments as a free man, marking the end of a chase shaped by fear and consequence. For investigators, this arrest symbolized the accumulation of countless hours of analysis, collaboration, and persistent dedication. As the sun rose higher, illuminating the space where Wade surrendered, it became clear that the story had reached its turning point. The man who had tried to outrun the truth now faced it with nowhere left to hide. And from this barren landscape, the path toward justice officially began. Inside the interrogation room, the air felt heavier than any prison cell Wade would ever enter. This was the space where the truth would be tested, where every inconsistency in his story would be revealed under the pressure of silence. The metal table held nothing except a recorder and a few neatly stacked files, each representing hours of investigative work. When Wade finally took a seat, investigators noticed the fatigue etched into his posture. He avoided eye contact, shifting between indifference and unease as questions slowly peeled back his version of events. The room was designed for clarity, no noise, no distraction, just the weight of facts. As investigators confronted him with digital evidence, financial trails, and his own movements, his narrative began to crumble. This room did not host confessions born from fear, it hosted truth extracted through undeniable proof. And as the hours passed, it became clear that Wade's story had nowhere left to hide. The interrogation room stood as the final barrier between deception and justice. The courtroom carried a quiet gravity the day Wade Wilson's trial began. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting soft beams across the polished wooden benches where reporters, loved ones, and curious onlookers sat in anticipation. Every detail of the room reflected a long history of justice, a place where countless truths had surfaced, and countless stories had found closure. As proceedings began, the atmosphere shifted from curiosity to solemnity. Prosecutors presented a timeline backed by digital data, financial records, and forensic analysis. Each exhibit strengthened the narrative investigators had pieced together. Wade sat expressionless, his future shrinking with every new revelation. The defense attempted to shape a story of desperation and mental collapse, but the prosecution's evidence remained firm. The courtroom became the stage where truth met consequence, where the emotional weight of the case finally found a structured voice. As testimony unfolded, those watching felt the inevitability of the outcome. The trial wasn't just about punishment, it was about ensuring that the story reached a conclusion rooted in justice. The evidence documents presented during the trial formed the backbone of the entire case. Each file was meticulously prepared, stamped, and catalogued to reflect the intense investigative work that had taken place over weeks. Among them were digital logs showing Wade's movement patterns, bank transactions highlighting attempts to withdraw funds, and forensic reports confirming material links to the scene. These documents spoke with a clarity that no witness could match. They created a timeline untouched by emotion, precise, unforgiving, and unbiased. For jurors, these files became a roadmap that led them from uncertainty to certainty. They demonstrated how even the smallest digital footprint or overlooked detail could ultimately reshape the entire narrative. As the prosecution moved through each exhibit, the jurors saw a pattern that Wade could no longer deny. The documents did more than prove guilt, they illustrated how truth survives even when someone tries to bury it. Through this organized evidence, the case reached an understanding that left little room for doubt. The courtroom sketch artist captured what cameras were not allowed to show, the human elements behind the legal battle. Through soft pencil strokes, Wade Wilson appeared not as a headline or rumor, but as a man confronting the consequences of his decisions. The artist emphasized subtle expressions, the tension in his jaw, the distant gaze, the quiet collapse of someone realizing the truth had finally overtaken his attempts to escape it. These sketches later circulated through newspapers and online discussions, becoming visual anchors for the public. They showed not only the defendant but the emotional landscape of the courtroom, the focused prosecutor, the attentive jurors, the quiet grief of those affected. These illustrations helped frame the trial in a way no transcript could capture. Each line told part of the story, reminding viewers that justice operates not only through evidence and law, but through the humanity of everyone involved. And through these sketches, the trial became more than proceedings, it became a final portrait of accountability. The judge's gavel symbolized the authority and finality that awaited Wade Wilson at the end of his trial. Resting quietly on the polished desk, it represented the power to transform weeks of testimony, evidence, and legal argument into a single decisive outcome. Throughout the proceeding, the judge maintained a firm yet balanced presence, ensuring fairness and order as emotional moments surfaced. When the final day arrived, the gavel felt heavier in symbolism. Jurors returned to the courtroom, their expressions solemn, aware of the weight their verdict carried. As the judge prepared to address the room, silence settled over everyone present. The gavel, still untouched, seemed to wait for the moment it would finalize the case. And when it eventually struck, the sound echoed with certainty, a sound that marked the end of Wade's attempts to rewrite the truth and the beginning of accountability. The gavel didn't merely announce a sentence, it delivered closure to a story shaped by quiet beginnings, destructive choices, and an unwavering pursuit of justice. The prison gates stood as the final threshold Wade Wilson would cross, a permanent boundary separating him from the world he once navigated with uncertainty and impulsive choices. Guarded by silent watchtowers and wrapped in layers of steel, the facility represented a reality shaped not by luck or circumstance, but by the irreversible decisions he made. When Wade passed through the gate, there was no resistance, no outburst, just a quiet acceptance overshadowing his posture. The sky above was gray, fitting the weight of the moment. Inside, time moved differently, structured by routines and consequences. For Wade, this place wasn't just punishment, it was where every attempt to escape responsibility finally ended. Investigators, prosecutors, and those close to the case understood that while justice does not restore what was lost, it provides a sense of stability and closure. The prison gate became the symbol of that closure, a reminder that no matter how far someone runs, truth eventually finds its way. And for Wade, this marked the beginning of a sentence with no return. Wade's prison cell reflected the stark consequences of his choices, a confined space offering nothing but time and reflection. The room held no personal comforts, no reminders of the life he once wandered through. Just a metal bed, a folded blanket, and a barred window framing a narrow slice of the outside world. For the first time in months, his movements were restricted not by fear, but by structure. The cell forced stillness upon him, a stillness that brought clarity he had avoided during his desperate attempts to flee. Investigators later noted how Wade expressed frustration during intake interviews, not at the legal system, but at the unraveling of the false narratives he had constructed for himself. In this cell, there were no distractions, no excuses, and no escape from truth. Each day resembled the last, mirroring the unchanging nature of his sentence. The prison cell symbolized the end of a long spiral, a place where consequences settled, and where the reality he had tried to escape lived with him permanently. Even the smallest details of Wade Wilson's new life reflected how drastically everything had changed. The simple prison meal tray, unseasoned food on a colorless plate, signified a life stripped of choice and freedom. Gone were the nights of drifting between jobs and familiar city streets, now each moment followed a rigid schedule. Investigators often reflect on how such environments leave individuals face to face with the truth they once tried to outrun. For Wade, the routine meals and silent surroundings became a constant reminder of the night that reshaped everything. The tray, a mundane object, highlighted the contrast between the chaos of his previous decisions and the stillness of his new reality. Here, inside these walls, even ordinary moments carried weight. They marked the slow passage of time in a life defined not by where he could go, but by what he had done. And as each day mirrored the next, the prison structure reinforced the lesson Wade could no longer avoid: choices have consequences, and consequences shape destiny. When the newspaper headline appeared, it reached thousands across the city who had followed the case with quiet curiosity and growing concern. The story of Wade Wilson, once a drifting figure barely noticed by most, became a public example of how hidden struggles and broken choices can collide in tragic ways. The article laid out the final verdict, summarizing weeks of courtroom testimony, forensic findings, and digital evidence. Readers sipped their morning coffee while absorbing the story's closure, reflecting on the fragile line between normalcy and disaster. For many, the headline served as a reminder that crime often grows from unnoticed roots, small behaviors, subtle warnings, and unresolved conflicts. The newspaper didn't sensationalize the tragedy; instead, it presented the outcome with measured clarity. And as the city moved forward, the case settled into memory, leaving behind lessons about trust, awareness, and the importance of recognizing boundaries. The newspaper front page captured the final chapter, a quiet acknowledgement that justice had taken its course. The memorial table became a place of quiet reflection for those who knew the victim, serving as a gentle reminder of a life interrupted too soon. White flowers symbolized purity and remembrance, while the flickering candles cast a warm glow over the framed photograph at the table's center. Friends and colleagues gathered here in moments of solitude, offering silent prayers and recalling memories that carried laughter, ambition, and kindness. This small space transformed into a tribute not only to who she was, but to the potential she carried, a future that was taken away in a moment of fear and misplaced intent. The memorial stood as a reminder that behind every case is a real person whose absence shapes the lives of many. As visitors placed notes and flowers, they reaffirmed the importance of standing against silence, ignorance, and unchecked behavior. The table didn't just honor a life, it supported healing. And through this gentle remembrance, her story continued to inspire conversations about awareness, boundaries, and compassion. The support group room held a different kind of significance in the aftermath of the case. Empty chairs formed a circle, waiting for individuals who had been affected by similar experiences, people who understood how quickly trust can turn into danger when warning signs go unnoticed. The community center offered a safe space for survivors, families, and friends to gather, share, and rebuild. Counselors led conversations about boundaries, emotional resilience, and recognizing subtle signs of manipulation. The case of Wade Wilson became a reference point, not as a spectacle, but as a teaching moment. Within these walls, individuals rediscovered strength, learning from each other's stories and forming connections grounded in empathy. The room symbolized healing, prevention, and awareness, a place where the impact of one tragedy could help prevent another. And as participants slowly filled the chairs, they carried forward a shared mission: to support one another, to listen without judgment, and to transform pain into purpose. In this circle, the community found a path toward recovery and understanding. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting warm stripes of light through the blinds, an officer gently closed the final case file on Wade Wilson. The soft click of the folder marked the end of months of rigorous investigation, a long journey that demanded patience, diligence, and unwavering commitment. The office walls, covered with maps, reports, and timelines, had witnessed countless late nights and early mornings dedicated to unraveling the truth. Now, the room fell silent as officers took a moment to absorb what the closure meant. They knew justice had been achieved, not through dramatic confrontations, but through meticulous work and collaboration. The closed file symbolized the end of one story and the beginning of renewed focus on protecting the community. As the officer placed the file into storage, the final rays of sunlight gave the room a calm, reflective glow. It was a reminder that every resolved case strengthens the resolve to pursue truth in all others, no matter how complex or quiet the path may be. The city skyline at dusk reflected the resilience of a community ready to move forward. Each glowing window represented individuals continuing with their lives, carrying memories, lessons, and renewed awareness. After the events of the case, the city learned that even in places where life feels predictable, hidden struggles can shape unexpected tragedies. Yet, the skyline symbolized hope, a reminder that healing does not happen overnight but grows quietly through shared understanding and vigilance. As day transitioned into night, the city embraced a calmness that softened the difficult chapters it had recently witnessed. Streets filled with everyday activity once again, showing how life continues even after profound disruptions. The skyline stood as a metaphor for continuity, stability, and unity. It illustrated that despite pain and loss, communities rebuild by supporting one another, learning from the past, and remaining attentive to the signs that matter. In its quiet glow, the city carried forward the story not as a scar, but as a lesson that strengthened its collective identity. The broken chain lay across the dark table like a quiet symbol of an ending long overdue. Each link represented the choices, pressures, and mistakes that built the path leading to the tragic night. When investigators examined the metaphorical chain behind the case, they saw patterns: financial desperation, unstable relationships, emotional impulses, and ignored warning signs. Breaking the chain symbolized not only Wade Wilson's final accountability but the interruption of a destructive cycle that could have continued without intervention. The broken link suggested that while consequences cannot reverse harm, they can prevent repetition. In the broader narrative, this visual represented the moment the story shifted from tragedy toward closure. It reminded viewers that justice serves to protect future lives, not simply punish past actions. The chain, fractured and motionless, illustrated a simple truth: cycles end when courage, awareness, and responsibility intersect. And in this case, the break ensured that the past would not repeat itself, offering a quiet sense of reassurance to those who needed it most. Raindrops sliding down the reflective glass created a somber yet peaceful image, a symbolic moment for those who took time to reflect on the lessons the case left behind. The blurred city lights outside represented the many lives that continued moving forward, unaware of the storms others face in silence. For investigators, families, and communities touched by the tragedy, this window became a metaphor for perspective. It illustrated how easily humanity can overlook subtle signs hidden behind bright distractions and busy routines. The rain softened the harshness of the story, reminding viewers that healing often begins quietly, in moments of introspection. Through this reflection, people understood the importance of communication, emotional boundaries, and awareness. The image wasn't about sadness alone, it carried the idea that clarity comes through reflection, just as the city's lights revealed themselves more clearly with each raindrop. In this quiet moment, the story found space to breathe, and the community found room to learn, process, and grow. The scale of justice stood balanced in the dimly lit room, illuminated by a warm spotlight that emphasized its timeless symbolism. In the story of Wade Wilson, justice was not swift, nor was it simple. It required forensic expertise, careful evaluation, and the unwavering dedication of investigators who refused to overlook even the smallest detail. As the trial concluded and truth emerged fully, the scale tipped toward accountability. Each piece of evidence placed upon it, financial records, digital footprints, witness testimony, contributed weight that could not be ignored. Though justice may never fully heal the loss endured, it provides a foundation upon which communities rebuild trust. This symbolic scale reminded viewers that fairness is not abstract, it is earned through persistence and clarity. The image offered a moment to appreciate the systems designed to protect, guide, and restore balance. And in the quiet glow of the room, the story reached its moral center: that truth must always stand heavier than fear, deception, or desperation. The long empty road at sunrise represented a new beginning, not for Wade Wilson, but for everyone affected by the case. As the sun cast its first light across the asphalt, it signified renewal, marking the moment life shifted from focusing on the tragedy to embracing the lessons learned from it. For communities, the road symbolized the importance of awareness, compassion, and vigilance. For friends and loved ones, it became a reminder that healing is a journey measured not in days, but in small steps forward. The empty road also illustrated the distance between who someone appears to be and the choices that reveal their true character. In Wade's story, that distance was filled with hidden struggles and unspoken intentions. As the sun rose, the narrative reached its point of clarity. the future belongs not to those who run from truth, but to those who face it with honesty. And so, the road stretched onward, encouraging the community to move forward with resilience and renewed purpose. The open journal signified the final chapter of the story, a quiet moment of closure, reflection, and understanding. With its blank pages ready to be filled, it represented both the ending of one narrative and the opportunity to shape new ones. Throughout the investigation and trial, countless details were recorded, timelines, motives, emotions, and truths that slowly surfaced. Now, as the story concludes, the journal invites viewers to reflect on what this tragedy revealed about human vulnerability, hidden struggles, and the consequences of ignoring small warning signs. The pen resting across the paper symbolizes the power of choice, the ability to write one's own path with awareness and responsibility. This case taught that desperation can distort judgment, that trust must be earned, and that truth always finds a way forward. The journal remains open because life does not end with one story, it continues with the lessons we carry from it. In this final image, the message becomes clear: justice brings closure, but reflection brings wisdom.